wanted a model as fast as autoregressive transformers, but also as flexible and creative as diffusion models. Well, grab your popcorn because today we're diving into block diffusion, a hybrid that blends the best of both worlds. Autoregressive models, super powerful, but they generate text one slow token at a time. Diffusion models, great for parallelism, but stuck with fixed-length outputs. Enter block diffusion, which cleverly generates blocks of text at a time, mixing diffusion's denoising magic with autoregression's sequential logic. So, does block diffusion finally bridge the gap? Let's break it down and see why it's setting new benchmarks.
Let's start by looking at why using diffusion models for language tasks can be so challenging. You might have seen diffusion models excel in generating images and videos, but text is a different story. Autoregressive models, which generate words one by one, naturally handle flexible lengths. Diffusion models, on the other hand, often deal with fixed-length outputs. That's not so helpful if you need answers that vary in length, like a chatbot that might respond with a single word or a paragraph. There's also the efficiency problem. Autoregressive models use caching, so they don't need to reprocess all previous tokens each time they predict a new one. Diffusion models don't benefit from this because they look at both past and future context at once, making them slower. And then there's the question of quality. Metrics like perplexity tend to be higher, worse, for diffusion models, meaning they often produce less fluent text. To tackle these issues, this paper introduces block discrete denoising diffusion language models, BD3LMs for short. Instead of producing entire sequences in one go or strictly token by token, BD3LMs generate text block by block. Each block is a small group of words. This hybrid setup helps the model handle longer outputs, reuse cached information, and produce text with better fluency. Computing the diffusion loss on a block basis requires careful design. That's where the main technical innovation of the paper comes in. Next, let's compare how different language models operate. We have the standard autoregressive models, think GPT, that produce text word by word in a fixed sequence. They're great for fluency and variable length output, but can be slow since each token depends on all those before it. Pure diffusion models do multiple refinement steps in parallel, which can speed things up. However, they often produce text of fixed length, don't support caching, and struggle with quality. That's where block diffusion comes in. It splits text into blocks and processes them one at a time, still using some diffusion steps but preserving the option to cache previous blocks. Look at the figure here, which compares the three approaches visually. You'll see how block diffusion is a blend. It keeps some parallelism from diffusion while retaining the sequential nature and caching benefits of autoregressive models. Towards the bottom of the page, notice the introduction of mathematical notation. It lays out how words become one-hot vectors and how a categorical probability distribution is applied. This is key to modeling discrete tokens during training and generation. Now, how do autoregressive and diffusion models generate text in the first place? Autoregressive models factorize the probability of a sentence into a product of conditional probabilities. Each new token depends on all previous ones, which produces coherent text but can be slow. Diffusion models start from a noisy version of the text and gradually remove noise through a sequence of transformations. This approach is parallelizable, but it struggles with variable length outputs and can have worse quality. Look at the equation here describing that transformation matrix. Notice how it models corruption and recovery at the word level. Training diffusion models involves minimizing a negative evidence lower bound, or NELBO. It measures how well the model reconstructs the original text from noisy inputs. However, high variance in this objective can make training unstable. That's precisely the issue the paper tackles next with the idea of generating text in blocks. Here's where blocks come into play. Rather than handling each token on its own, BD3LMs group tokens into small chunks. The model still moves left to right overall, but within each chunk, it applies a diffusion process. If you look at the first equation on this page, you'll see how the probability of the full sequence is factorized into probabilities of each block. Then, the second equation shows how each block is denoised by using context from the blocks before it. This blockwise method also enables the use of caching. Autoregressive models normally store key-value pairs, KV caching, to speed up generation, and BD3LMs extend that idea to blocks. That's a big deal for efficiency. Glance at the last equation on this page, which demonstrates how specialized attention masks let the transformer process multiple blocks in parallel while still maintaining the sequence order. It's all about striking a balance between speed and text quality. Now let's see how these block-based diffusion models train and generate text in practice. Check out the training algorithm here. It corrupts each block with noise, then teaches the model to clean it up, using the final predictions to update parameters. This repeats until the model learns to robustly reverse the corruption process. For generation, BD3LMs produce blocks of text in sequence. They'll use key-value caching to remember past details, which cuts down on recomputation. This helps the model generate coherent text without starting from scratch for every block. Notice the discussion about likelihood gaps between diffusion and autoregressive models. A specialized loss function reduces the impact of noise, making BD3LMs more stable. Look at Table 1, which shows how adjusting the noise schedule helps BD3LMs get closer to autoregressive perplexities. That's a significant milestone for a diffusion-based approach. Even with these improvements, training stability can still be an issue. One major factor is gradient variance, how much the model's training updates fluctuate. High variance can make learning harder. The graph on this page illustrates how various training setups affect loss stability. The baseline BD3LM in one-line color experiences greater variance, while the tuned noise schedule in another color calms everything down, making it look more like an autoregressive model. This is explained formally through equations that break down batch-based training loss and variance in gradients. The first equation shows how the model processes multiple sequences at once, each with different noise levels. The second gives a sense of how gradient variance can spiral out of control if the noise schedule isn't set properly. Up next, we'll see how clipped noise schedules help keep this under control. So how much noise is the right amount? Too much masking, and the model learns nothing. Too little, and it doesn't get enough practice handling corruption. Enter clipped noise schedules. The idea is to bound the noise rate so it never goes too high or too low. This ensures a smoother training curve. Notice Table 2 here, which shows how different masking strategies change the quality of generated text. Then we come to the main comparisons. Look at Table 3, where BD3LMs face off against autoregressive and other diffusion models. Autoregressive models typically show the lowest perplexity, the best fluency, while pure diffusion models often have perplexities over 30. BD3LMs bridge that gap, especially when the block size is set just right. L prime equals to 4. The final score of 28.23 is a big win for diffusion-based text generation, even though there's still room to improve. Next, let's see if BD3LMs can handle more than just standard training scenarios. How do they do in zero-shot evaluations, or when asked to generate longer texts? First, check out Table 4 for perplexity results. You'll see that BD3LMs outshine earlier diffusion models like MDLM by up to 13%. Though they still trail behind autoregressive models in pure fluency. Table 5 then looks at zero-shot perplexity on PubMed. Interestingly, BD3LMs do better than autoregressive models here. They seem particularly good for scientific text, which suggests that certain domains might favor the BD3LM approach. One glaring issue with classic diffusion models is their inability to generate text that goes beyond a fixed length. BD3LMs solve that. Look at Table 6, which demonstrates that BD3LMs can produce text sequences up to 10 times longer than standard diffusion approaches. This is a major stride toward flexible text generation. Of course, we also care about computation. How many function evaluations does the model need, and does that affect quality? Table 7 compares generative perplexity. BD3LMs clearly do better than older diffusion-based methods, moving closer to autoregressive performance without increasing the number of function evaluations. Then Table 8 dives deeper into the importance of noise scheduling. If the model applies noise too aggressively, everything becomes unstable. If it's too timid, the model doesn't learn much about reversing the noise. Clipping the noise within a certain range strikes the balance. This keeps perplexity low and stabilizes training, especially for smaller block sizes. Finally, there's a note on training efficiency. BD3LMs can process blocks sequentially, or use memory-efficient attention kernels to handle multiple blocks at once. The latter is faster, letting BD3LMs maintain their competitive performance while speeding up training. Now we get to a broader comparison. BD3LMs aren't the only diffusion-based method in town. They build on D3PM by addressing fixed-length constraints, analyzing the perplexity gap with autoregressive models, and optimizing noise schedules. This makes BD3LMs more practical than standard D3PM. They also outdo MDLM by tackling the gradient variance problem head-on. You might wonder about continuous, Gaussian, diffusion models. In theory, they can be elegant, But in practice, they often lag behind discrete approaches like BD3LMs. Another related idea is semi-autoregressive diffusion, where models combine autoregressive and diffusion steps. BD3LMs fit here, but they also improve likelihood estimation and sample efficiency. Of course, BD3LMs aren't perfect. They're generally slower than purely autoregressive models, and they can still experience issues like hallucinations and copyright concerns, just like other large language models. But if you look at the conclusion here, you'll see the big achievements. BD3LMs resolve the fixed-length constraint, narrow the perplexity gap, and bring new ideas for training stability in discrete diffusion. Together, these make BD3LMs a significant step forward in diffusion-based language modeling. Thanks for joining us today. Happy learning and stretching together!